When you look at the YouTube shorts and TikTok videos, how much of a one-sided story are you getting within like 12 seconds? But then that 12-second video creates an opinion about something without knowing all the facts. That's the whole point of when you see algorithms feeding into your narrative, you just believe more and more into what your narrative is, where it's like, I'm right, you're wrong, and nobody wants to be open-minded through it all, right? Morning, everyone, or should I say afternoon, Trade to Black Time. I am your host, Shad Dales. Earnings season, what do you think of it? Has it been flat, good, bad? What's the future hold? Are you concerned? Are you excited? Does this industry still have the same long-term potential that many are hoping for? Well, let's find out. Let's bring in our two guests, Ben and Anthony. Ben, lead financial writer, Benjamin A. Smith. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see everyone here. Glad to participate again.
Yes, Anthony Verrill, good to see you.
Morning, sir. How's it going?
Good, and good. Had some good Twitter spaces over the past couple of days. Had Verano in and had Rob Seacrest and Wolfie, Jason Spatafora on last week. We had some great feedback. And later this week at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern time on Friday, we're going to be having Jason Wild on to talk about all the hearings at Safe Banking last week, which should be interesting. And I know we did have some of those discussions in our Twitter space. But Anthony, we'll begin with you. What was your takeaway from some of the stuff that you heard about the Safe Banking hearing from last week?
I mean, it's positive in the short term. I think it's a net positive overall for the sector. I think it's going to be a long way until we get something done. I mean, we've got 45 days post-hearing for comments. So, I mean, then that puts us in almost the first half of summer. You know how politicians work. And I mean, what I'm mostly concerned about right now is the severity of other things that are going on within the government. You've got the debt ceiling. You've got Russia and Ukraine. You've got inflation. You've got the deleveraging of the dollar globally. There are a lot of conversations being had around Washington. And as much as I want to believe it, I don't think cannabis is even in the top 10 of them right now. That being said, it's being talked about in some light within the government. That's a first step in the right direction. We got our hearing. There is momentum. The guys from Verano last night on the Spaces, they're in Washington. Jason was just in Washington. The heavy hitters in the space, they're going to Washington. They're making sure the conversations are getting moved forward. I've got a lot of confidence that we'll be able to get something done here sooner or later, but I don't think it's going to be within the next 9 to 12 months.
9 to 12 months, you think? Wow. Yeah. Well, Ben.
Yeah. I mean, we're going on 10 years. We're going on 10 years now since SAFE was introduced.
Has it been 10 years? 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we put out a tweet this morning. It was first introduced.
Ben did. So thanks. So thanks for that.
Yeah, July 10th. 2013 by Ed Perlmutter, who's now retired. So, I mean, that's how long it's been. It went 7 or 8 times, I believe it's been through the House.
Wow.
What's another year?
What was going on 10 years ago? Look back at the old history well. What was like the number one song 10 years ago this week? Do we know?
10 years ago, it might have been 10 years ago, it might have been something EDM.
EDM?
I'd have to guess like Avicii was charting. Then 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Blackhawks were winning their first or second cup right in the middle of starting their dynasty in the NHL.
Yeah. NFL, who was in 2013? Listen, our viewers are probably saying I'm not coming on this podcast to talk about what happened 10 years ago, so I'll get back on track. But Verano with Aaron Miles was on last week, and he said same thing as to what you guys are saying. This is going to be drawn out. There's going to be delays, which is a good thing, obviously, for a company like Verano. So, Ben, like when you hear that, what do you think of that? Like how like when you start to think about some of the trends that are going to take place in this industry as capital dries up and has dried up, we're going to see a lot of change happen real fast in the next 12 months if we don't see some sort of legislation movement based on what Anthony just said, right?
I think so, especially for the smaller companies, smaller MSOs, single state operators, and non-public dispensaries, PrivCos. I think they're going to be affected most. I actually think on the higher end, those companies are actually doing better in a lot of ways because their capital expenditures are going down, and a lot of these companies are having because most of their footprints are already built out, which makes them profitable or free cash flow profitable. Even after 280E, so they'll be able to survive. A lot of them have already done they've already done their debt deals in 2022 and 2021, so they'll be fine. It's more the single state operators and smaller companies that are going to be in trouble. So you're going to have the top 5 or 6 survive either way, I think. And let's hope safe happens, and then more people can survive.
Yeah, I think a lot of people already know that sentiment where, they look at the next year. If there's no safe, companies are going to dry up. I think what people don't know is how quickly and how fast it will happen. Do you think that we see a lot of companies shutting it down in the next 9 to 12 months, Anthony, if, like you said, we don't see anything pass?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we see a lot. I think we'll see some. Probably some others that we're not expecting will have financial hardships within the next year. But one thing's for certain, and I've been to California and a couple other states as well as Florida in the last couple of months. I've been to a ton of dispensaries. People are buying cannabis. People are not stopping buying cannabis. It's here. It's going to stay, and the tier ones are probably going to be the surviving entities from this. But I think they're also going to go on an M&A spree. A lot of these guys in the tier ones come from very sophisticated backgrounds. They come from Wall Street. They're from legal. They come from big insurance. They come from a lot of other walks of business where they're going to be able to deploy their expertise, and they're going to be able to grow their enterprises very cheaply and very efficiently. I think that's what we're going to be looking towards in the next couple of quarters.
Agreed, totally. And when you talk about the dispensaries that are doing well, I said last week in a podcast, because these are some of the stories I heard when I was in Benzenga last month, that there are some independent dispensary owners that actually open up and are not aware of a 280E tax code. So that gives you a real example as to how much growth and education still needs to be done within this industry, but why we've seen such a train wreck in so many ways. But the ones that are doing it efficiently are bound to succeed long term, and a lot of those actually fit under the top MSO umbrellas. But you actually were saying off camera before you started, you were up at a True Leaf dispensary earlier this week, and maybe share what you saw when you actually attended one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I was there for 16 minutes. 16 minutes because I was literally counting on my watch. 27 people walked in the door. And those were walk-ins,
27.
and those were people that were waiting to go back. Yeah, those were walk-ins. Those were people waiting to go back. The actual number was probably closer to 40 as people were coming in and getting pickup orders that they had. And that was just in the 15 minutes that I was there. Also, the basket size that I was seeing. I was paying attention to what everybody else was buying. People weren't buying one-off items. People were probably buying 5, 6, 7 items on average. Which was pretty surprising to see, but it was just people rolling through. I saw the same thing in Cali 2 weeks ago when I was in San Fran. I was at a Stizzy dispensary, and it was just people were just rolling in and out and in and out. I'm actually about to go check out Sunburn today and see what the foot traffic and the product mix looks like this afternoon.
So that was right in Fort Lauderdale that you saw that traffic.
Yeah, it was True Leaf in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh. Well, let's talk about the Florida market. One of the companies that actually has a footprint in there is Air Wellness. They actually released their latest earnings, and this is really amongst the top MSOs. A lot of people have been down on this company, but some of the highlights, they opened up 7 new stores in Florida since the beginning of 2023, bringing their total footprint to 60 dispensaries across the state. They're also on track to rebrand the company's Florida stores from Liberty Health Sciences to Air Cannabis Dispensaries this summer. $96.5 million in cash right now. Revenue was up 18% year over year to $117.7 million, up 3% sequentially, and adjusted EBITDA up 64% year over year to $26.3 million, up 9% sequentially. GAAP loss from operations was $21.7 million compared to $21 million in Q1 of 2022. So, Ben, what do you think of their latest earnings. And what do you make of this company moving forward, knowing there's just a lot of been an uncertainty amongst investors regarding this company as of late?
I think there's kind of two ways to look at it. If you look at it, if you compare it against some of the top MSOs, the Big Four, Curaleaf, Cresco, etc., maybe they weren't up to par. But if you take it in context about them going through a reorganization, right? They changed their upper level management. Jennifer Drake left late last year. Etc. I think the quarter was, relatively decent. One thing I did notice that they guided free cash flow positive for full year 2023, which is what you want to see, right? And of course, they've been right-sizing or trying to right-size Florida for several quarters now after the Liberty Health acquisition, in which some of their facilities weren't up to par. That they had to, reinvigorate. So I think in that context, it was pretty good. Revenue did increase. They're building their big footprint in Florida, as Anthony mentioned. So I like it in context. If they can keep up this momentum and keep driving forward, I think things could look pretty decent. Although on aggregate, I think they sort of lagged some of the top MSOs with the overall operational performance.
Anthony, you've talked about some of the dispensaries you attended in the Florida market and some of the companies that are doing it well. But as you said, 60 dispensaries across the state. Can they make a major impact within the Florida market? Or do you think like companies like Trulieve are just only going to build a more and more stranglehold opportunity within the actual market itself?
Yeah, so I mean, my relationship or my input or my view on AYR, it's kind of like love-hate. I think there's a lot of things I like about the company, that being their Florida footprint, despite it being Liberty Health, and I think that they probably have one of the worst had one of the worst retail experiences in Florida. Everything was very sanitized. I mean, they've got about 8.5% market share as far as flower in the space or in the state of Florida. I mean, their stock is up right now 27% on the open.
Wow.
So I mean, it's ripping. It's ripping today. Their market cap before the open was 70 million. So I mean, if you want to start to get like in crazy valuation metrics, you're valuing the company at what, less than 1x cash, and if they've got 70 dispensaries at the end of the year, that's slapping a valuation of $1 million on each Florida dispensary alone. You could argue that the stock is grossly discounted right now. That being said, I mean, they've got a lot of funky debt on their balance sheet, which no one really knows the true number, whether it's 200 million, 300 million, 400 million. There's a lot of opacity around it. I've heard management get on Twitter Spaces, and I didn't really trust what they were saying. They didn't sound too in tune with what was going on in the business or in the market, which leads me to cause for concern. But from a risk-reward perspective, if you were to buy their stock today, and this is not financial advice, and they do pull through and they do execute in Florida, and adult use comes on in Florida, I mean, the Florida assets are worth 3 or 4 times their market cap right now. So I would say the risk reward is there. That being said, there's also pretty bold competitors coming into the state of Florida. I think you've got Verano, that's a highly sophisticated operator. Their Move outfit looks great. I think the Move dispensaries are one of the best retail experiences I've seen in Florida. You've got Brady bringing on and scaling Sunburn, Trulieve, or the 800-pound gorilla that, to be honest, love them or hate them, they're never going anywhere, and they've got market share across the entire state. And then you've got the likes of like Jungle Boys and Flowery and a bunch of different brands that are coming in from the West Coast that have highly sophisticated operators and brands. So Florida it's a mixed bag, but market share is going to win. If they've got 70 dispensaries at the end of the year, I'll buy them.
Yeah. To me, it sounds
Anthony,
like... Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to jump in there. And you said earlier that you're going to visit the Sunburn dispensary. And I've noticed that their branding is pretty unique. It has that sort of like 1970s sort of throwback feel. Do you think what is your impression of it? And do you think do you think this is going to catch on with consumers in Florida?
So I've talked to Brady about the brand for Sunburn. It's got a lot of history within his family. It's got a lot of history pertaining to his dad and him, and a lot of stuff from back in the 70s and 80s, which we can have him on and have him dive into that ethos and that brand. But what he's doing is he's trying to build an East Coast cannabis brand, which is needed. There are no East Coast cannabis brands. There's West Coast cannabis brands that find their way over here that have that California vibe, that OG like NorCal vibe in their products and their branding, etc. Brady wants to build a Florida East Coast cannabis brand, and I think he's doing a bang-up job, and it's working. It's going to resonate. He's done a huge grassroots campaign. I've seen them everywhere from Riptide Music Festival to Tortuga Music Festival to things up and down the state that they're doing experientially. And it's all Florida in the sun, that kind of vibe.
Lifestyle.
With the brand. And I think it's a lifestyle brand. And I think they're going to win. He knows how to operate. He's already sold a multi-million-dollar asset in one plant. So we know he knows how to grow cannabis. Let's see if he knows how to build a brand, which I'm pretty confident he will.
When you look at the end of the day, it's storytelling. And he's storytelling what his brand is, and we don't see this anywhere within this space. Like, we've had a few things, like I've often talked about the 850-pound brownie that MaryMed created and the kind of exposure that got. But yeah, you're right with Brady. It's just, when you look at America as a whole and the glory days, you go back to the 70s, especially the 80s, and then you factor in a Florida lifestyle and it's surfing, and any event and grassroots opportunity has, it's around really good times, which is this Tortuga event. So yeah, like, I think the end of the day, but if you're going to do those sorts of things, make sure that people actually that don't attend those events are able to see and witness a lot of that stuff, which I think he's done a bang up job on it, right?
Yeah,
I think you make a good point.
And I mean,
Shaq,
up
too,
until now,
because you don't.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ben.
No, I was just going to say, because
go ahead, Ben.
what you said just resonated with me, because you don't see, and what Anthony said, because you don't see a lot of like East Coast brands, right? Like, you see a lot of corporate kind of sterile brands, like brands that are sort of born out of a corporate, brainstorm or whatever. But you don't see a lot of genuine. I get this feeling from this sort of location, right? And I guess that's what Brady's doing, and MaryMed does it to a certain extent, but other than that, I don't see a lot of what you'd call East Coast brands where you have like a lifestyle attached to it.
That's
but
branding
you didn't need
101.
The thing too is you didn't need it until now. You don't even need it now. You don't even need it now in a state like Florida. But it's coming with adult use, and with rec comes the brand wars, which is that next iteration that we're going to see in states like Florida.
Okay, speaking about rec in Florida, news came out this week about their attorney general there trying to bring up questions about the validity of the ballot initiative, right? And questions to the Florida Supreme Court. And you've talked previously about DeSantis not really supporting cannabis, not really a fan of the industry. So where do you think this is going? Do you think the AG will succeed? And ultimately, do you think the ballot initiative will get on the ballot in 2024?
Yeah, so for context, her husband's a DEA agent, so you can understand where her allegiance aligns. I hope it doesn't get shot down.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's not surprising. It was bound to happen. DeSantis doesn't like cannabis, despite him being a vet and despite it having a lot of. It is surprising. It's also surprising to me, though, that DeSantis yesterday said that he's going to fight on the national stage for a 6-week abortion policy. Like,
who's running this campaign? The guy's gone rogue.
Correct.
Like,
so there's a lot of. I don't want to get off topic here because this isn't cannabis related per se, but there's a lot of things going around right now in the media and on TV and online that are starting to call DeSantis the fascist. And if you look at what he's doing, don't get me wrong, I agree with a lot of the stuff that he is doing. But if you want to define fascism and you want to line it up to what he's doing and the way that he's carrying himself and the way that he's scapegoating people and the way that he's running the state of Florida, you could argue that he's teetering on that line.
Interesting.
I don't know how much more room DeSantis has to run, but I'm praying he doesn't just shoot down cannabis in Florida, because we need adult use. And if these companies get adult use, Trulieve, Air, Verano, they start printing money in the state of Florida. Yeah,
what a market!
It could be the biggest market in the country. All of the tourists that we get on a yearly basis will become consumers.
When I see Southern Florida right now, it is like Mardi Gras. It seems like every single week of what's going
Yeah.
on there. It's just so many people have moved down there. It's like people just want to escape everything that we're seeing online, the way the world is, and it's like they want to escape reality and just enjoy a simple life, and they're all flocking, obviously, to Southern Florida. Huge market opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Now, is the Florida
crazy.
Supreme Court known to be politicized, Anthony? Like you would know best with this,
Yeah,
or are they
unfortunately.
known to be impartial?
Yeah. Everything in Florida politics is there's money involved, and relationships involved, up and down the spectrum. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. In addition to Air Wellness, Tilt Holdings also had their latest earnings, and what's somewhat surprised of basically what they reported. The revenue was flat year over year, net loss of $4.9 million, negative adjusted EBITDA. They have, get this, $5.2 million in cash, and a total net debt of March 31st, 2023. So all in all, Ben, were you surprised at these latest results? This is a company that a lot of people are feeling very positive about, but there's been some uncertainty the last couple of weeks involving this, and then basically the resignation of obviously Gary Santo.
I'm not sure if that's tied in. Perhaps it is. You know, the results were a little bit disappointing. I'm not totally surprised, just because there's been a huge sort of price compression in Massachusetts. Their pricing was quite high, and there was like a shortage at one time, I believe, 4 or 5 quarters ago, and then they experienced a huge compression in pricing. So their products, the pricing power there probably isn't all that great. It wouldn't surprise me if unit volume was stable to higher, but then the revenue profile was just lower because of the pricing situation there. So not surprising. They're a little low on cash too on the balance sheet, which is perhaps something to look at. But hopefully the new management team comes in and rights the ship. They got a good
great group of people
there,
over there. Great group of people over there. I think a lot of people are hoping and rooting for this company right now. But good points, right?
Yeah, they got very good products. They got very good technology. Their vape cartridges are I hear are very, very prominent in the market, and they got good vape.
Oh, they're the best.
They're the best. Yeah,
they're the best. Jupiter is a great company. Jupiter's it's a non-leaf touching business or non-plant touching business, but Jupiter is a very, very good company that has coast to coast market share in the vape space.
One thing we got to bring up in our next podcast, too, I've had a lot of people reach out to me for weeks, always asking me, are you ever going to talk about Sundial? And I know they had their earnings this week. So in our next podcast, we will dive deep into that and have a look at that. So just to make sure that Brett Sloan, who's been emailing me nonstop, wants to find out about that company. So we'll dive into that. Last thing I want to touch on, and this should be an interesting topic of conversation, is this new Miller Lite ad that many are seeing as a woke ad comparative to Bud Light. First off, have you guys seen the commercial and let the fireworks begin? What'd you think of it, Anthony?
I saw it. I saw Twitter's reaction to it. A lot of the right-leaning, like conservative Twitter handles that I follow started calling it woke, wokeism, like just very dark and outraged in response to it. I mean, I thought it was tasteful advertising. I mean, I think Alana Glazer's hilarious. I mean, I understand their edge on companies don't need to apologize for what they did in the past.
Yeah.
They want to make it analogous to like people tearing down statues or rewriting narratives to fit social norms of today. I don't really think this advertisement fit that or wanted to be that. It just wanted to kind of have an undertone on how we're going to appeal to women, how we're going to gravitate women towards beer drinkers, and how we can kind of get their attention. I thought it was great. I think if you have a problem with it, you need to figure out just other things to kind of have that point of view on. I thought it was benign, and I thought it had nothing to do or anywhere near the, I guess, social disdain that the Bud Light ad triggered.
Yeah, I agree insofar that with Anthony that it wasn't even on the same stratosphere as Dylan Mulvaney. I just and we were speaking off camera about this. I don't like when brands, companies, countries, whatever, sort of look at their history in the past, which was a different time and a different place, and start apologizing for that, right? That's kind of the only thing that makes me a little bit like, why are you doing that? Like, we're the 80s and 90s were kind of a different time, right? It wasn't like they were doing, there was illegality or things like that. It was just more, scantily clad females and stuff like that. The things that wouldn't be as appropriate now, but at the time they weren't deemed not appropriate. So to apologize for that, to apologize for your history and past, I think is a little bit too much. But was it Dylan Mulvaney? Absolutely not. That was kind of off the deep end.
Well, I think the big question is that we ever stop and think, what are we looking to achieve? Like, what does that achieve with basically tearing down the history of what? Go ahead.
You know what Miller Lite was looking to achieve? To get 3 guys on a podcast talking about their advertisement. And that's what it did. It got everybody talking about it. And there aren't people out there right now. Oh, yeah. But there aren't people out there.
People looking at one way. What's the other way? It's just like, what are we looking to accomplish out of all this right now? I think there's an overarching plan. It's all to conquer and divide. And as much as you bring stuff like that up, you're viewed as a conspiracy theorist. But the reality is like, Jesus, like, where are we right now as far as a society? And like everybody having different views, different things. You watch on 60 Minutes and there's a different format or template of TikTok that Chinese people use versus what we're using. Like, is this an overarching plan in due time? Call me crazy.
I mean, I read, I don't know if you've probably read this book, Ben, but The Fourth Turning, which is a pretty good book. And I mean, the way that it defines cultures over time, we're kind of in this valley of what they like to define as the culture wars. When you've got not only all the citizens of this country, but a lot of people globally. I mean, they don't agree fundamentally with anyone else's perspective. It's just, we're completely polarized. We're completely just argumentative with everybody. No one wants to hear what the other side has to say. They just think that their side is gospel. And it's just being hyper perpetuated in the media. The media does it. I mean, it's starting to just look obvious.
What makes it worse too are like, when you look at the YouTube shorts and TikTok videos, how much of a one-sided story are you getting within like 12 seconds? But then that 12-second video creates an opinion about something without knowing all the facts. That's the whole point of like, when you see algorithms feeding into your narrative, you just believe more and more into what your narrative is, where it's like, I'm right, you're wrong, and nobody wants to be open-minded through it all, right?
Yeah, and it's like when CNN, and I'm just going to use this as an example, it's like when CNN comes out and they're covering a story, and the guy that got choked out on the subway, they paint him as like some innocent bystander that was on the subway. What they don't tell you is the guy got arrested 40 times in the last 6 months for violent and petty crimes, and he was just released. They don't tell you that. I mean, they want to tell you as much as they need to tell you, and they want to tell you, and then push their narrative the entire way home.
I'm of the belief that there's always overarching structures that attempt to divide and conquer, whether that's like foreign states and their intelligence agencies, or like even Fortune 500, or even disvested interests, like the carbon credit system run by Al Gore and stuff like that, right? To try to change society and attitudes with some ESG. So this is not really a debate about global warming and stuff like that, whether you think it's real or not. But a lot of it is a lot of the narratives that you see in the media are fomented from the top, either Fortune 100 companies, globalist institutions, and stuff like that. And there's always a divide and conquer aspect of it, because there's always people profiting. I mean, George Soros is on the record saying, he destroyed, the Bank of England. Even if you want to go back to like, I think like the 1800s in the 17th century, where I think there was like the Rothschilds. They sent like people on horses to say that that England won the war or whatever, and then they actually lost the war, and then they profited. The stock market crashed, in the 1700s, and then they profited. They bought up everything and made a fortune, right? So this has been going on for a long time. Just people profit, and people always have motives, and the key is to identify which are real and what are not. And I don't think a lot of people sort of give that thought to it.
Take me back to the glory days of the 1980s. Oh, baby, the 1980s. What a time it was in Miami in the 1980s, huh, Anthony? Donnie Johnson.
I wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't around until the latter part of the.
What
the
a
80s.
show, Miami Vice, back in the day. And speaking of the 80s, you guys have got to see the movie Air. I watched it this week. Holy cow.
Oh, yeah, I heard it's great.
Unbelievable. In the end, when his mother calls up and asks for, a certain, piece of the business as far as each sneaker that's sold, I got to give Michael Jordan's mother credit. Like she was a very stern, set in her ways, but she knew what her son was worth, and man, was she right. But today, that has resulted in $400 million of passive income for Michael Jordan each and every year based on the amount of shoes that Air Jordan sells. Isn't that mind-boggling? $400 million of passive income every single year. And they bought Converse in 2003, back when Converse basically had Larry Bird and Magic Johnson in the crew. But, man, it's a fascinating story.
I remember having those Converse with the little meshes on the corner.
Yeah.
Those were my favorite shoes when I was in high school. So I haven't heard that brand in a long time. I guess they did get bought out, right, in the late 90s?
Yeah, back in 03, they got bought out by Nike. But props to Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. They did a heck of a job bringing that story together. But I heard Ben Affleck was actually, his palms were sweaty. He was really nervous when Michael Jordan came into the room because he looked him straight in the eye and said, whatever you do in this movie, don't screw up the role of my mother. And, how she basically, was instrumental, obviously, in his life and making sure they got the character right. But I've heard so many stories that Michael Jordan, there's a lot of famous people in the world, but when that guy enters the room, everybody turns heads.
Yeah,
now, it's amazing how Michael Jordan couldn't become a good executive.
Say that again. Both of you spoke there.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Anthony.
No, I was saying a couple of my buddies golf with him, and they say he's got this aura around him.
Yeah,
that's just like, I don't want to say it's like Jesus-like, but it's like Jesus-like.
Yeah.
But they say he's as long as you're respectful and as long as you're like a decent person, he's like the nicest guy around.
I bet.
You just don't fuck with him, or you don't challenge him on anything.
Nope.
And usually it's
does
good.
he still put does he still gamble on the golf course and put like $1 million a hole?
I'm
I
sure.
remember those stories where he was putting like $1 million a hole with Barkley or whatever.
$1 million bucks. The guy makes $400 million of passive income every single year. That's nothing compared to him. But you don't want to challenge him because a prime example of that is Isaiah Thomas, who's still reaping not reaping, but facing the consequences 30, 31 years later after what he did walking off.
Yeah.
That is one relationship that'll never be amended. It's too bad because you know what? When you saw what Isaiah and Magic did a couple years ago, that was amazing. But there's no way that Michael Jordan gives a shit about what Isaiah Thomas thinks. I think he's just fine in his own skin.
Yeah. By the way, did you see who won the lottery for the NBA?
Oh, my God. San Antonio's got how many draft picks along with a foundational piece? Like, you talk about just some organizations knowing how to press reset and get better. But I feel for Detroit Piston fans, they dropped from 1 to 5. They're not even going to get one of the top 3 picks.
I personally, and I might get heat for this, but if I was an NBA GM, I'm probably drafting Brandon Miller over Wembanyama. Like, I get the hype. I understand, like, what's going on, but I'll take the 6'9", 200-pound stud who looks like he could be LeBron James or Dwayne Wade or one of these guys versus the 7'4" guy that if you look across the NBA right now, these tall guys aren't durable. Like, they don't last. They're hardly.
There's something like, that I guess people see that I don't. He just looks so frail, and when you get some big bodies, I don't know. Like,
no, but he's
like Jay Billis last night was comparing him.
I've seen that guy. He's doing fade and jumpers.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
He's doing he's hitting threes.
Jay Billis last night was comparing him to LeBron.
Wow.
Like Jay Billis last night literally was like, "This is the most talented basketball player I've seen since LeBron James." Like,
Now that's what everybody says. He's the
I just
greatest
don't-
generational player since LeBron James.
I
So
mean, that's
you
what they
think
said
there
about
could
Zion.
be? You think Wembanyama's middle name could be Darko? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, no, oh no, 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 no. I don't think he's Darko. I don't think he's Darko, but I mean, he could be closer to Chris Bosh than LeBron James.
Think about that. Detroit could have probably chosen Carmelo Anthony with the second pick and probably won a lot more than one championship in the early 2000s. And 20 years later, one of the best generational prospects
I mean,
to
they
come
could
into the
have
NBA
had-
draft since LeBron James, and they dropped from 1 to 5. Pew! That's it. All right, guys.
It would have been great to see him and see Wembanyama and Cade.
Yeah, it would have been amazing. Okay, thanks for the update. We continue on to the earnings season, and we'll check back in with you guys both later this week.
Talk soon, guys.
Take care. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.